January 18th. Somewhere in northern Europe, the war had transformed roads into graveyards and silence into a warning. Snow drifted across a frozen intersection where four narrow roads met beneath a sky the color of old steel. Engines growled, tracks rattled, exhaust hung in the air like smoke from invisible fires. A military convoy pushed slowly through the winter darkness, heading toward the front. Then everything stopped. Not because of enemy fire. Not because of a blocked road. Not because of mechanical failure. A German shepherd had walked into the middle of the intersection, sat down, and refused to move. At first, the soldiers laughed. One private muttered that the dog was probably tired. Another joked that even the animals wanted the war to slow down. But the handler standing beside the animal wasn't laughing. Because Rex had never done this before. Not once. Not in training. Not during patrols. Not during bombardments. Not during combat. The dog sat perfectly still, ears forward, eyes fixed on the road ahead, waiting, watching, refusing every command. And less than 10 minutes later, men would be dead because nobody understood what he was trying to say. Or perhaps worse, someone understood and chose not to listen. Captain Erich Falk was not a cruel man. He was a man under pressure. There is a difference. At 38 years old, Falk had built his reputation on efficiency. Orders were executed. Timetables were met. Objectives were achieved. In military organizations, success often belongs to the officer who keeps things moving, and that morning, everything depended on movement. Higher command expected his column to reinforce a critical position before noon. Delays were unacceptable. Excuses were worthless. Every lost minute increased the risk of failure. So when he saw an entire convoy halted because of a dog sitting in the road, his patience evaporated. "What is this?" he demanded. The handler, Sergeant Lucas Weber, approached immediately. "Sir, something is wrong." Falk stared at him. "Something is wrong because your dog is blocking the intersection." "No, sir." Weber glanced toward Rex. The animal hadn't moved. "That's exactly what worries me." The captain folded his arms. "You have 30 seconds to explain." Weber hesitated. "How do you explain instinct? How do you justify a feeling? How do you tell a superior officer that an animal knows something nobody else can see?" "I think he's detected something." "What?" "I don't know." The answer only made Falk angrier. The convoy sat motionless. Engines idled. Time disappeared. And now his explanation was uncertainty. A dog sensed something, perhaps, maybe, possibly. To Falk, it sounded ridiculous. To Weber, it sounded terrifying. Because Rex wasn't afraid, he was warning them. And there was a difference. The bond between military handlers and their dogs is difficult to explain to outsiders. They work together, train together, survive together. Over time, trust becomes instinct. A handler learns the meaning of small movements. A shift of posture, a glance, a subtle hesitation, things invisible to everyone else. Weber had spent nearly 4 years with Rex. He knew the animal as well as some men knew their brothers. And what frightened him most wasn't that Rex had stopped. It was how he had stopped. No barking, no panic, no confusion, just certainty. The dog wasn't uncertain about danger. The dog was convinced. Weber could feel it. Yet feelings were not evidence. Not in the military. Not when operations were on the line. Not when a captain's reputation hung in the balance. The argument intensified. Several officers gathered nearby. Some quietly supported Weber. Others sided with Falk. The discussion evolved into something larger than a dog. It became a conflict between expertise and authority, between observation and hierarchy, between a man who knew his animal and a man who commanded the mission. Neither realized they were arguing over life and death. 20 minutes passed. The winter wind grew stronger. Snow danced across the frozen road. The radio operator approached Falk. Another message from headquarters. Another reminder. Another demand for progress. The captain's jaw tightened. Every delay now had consequences. Every minute strengthened his belief that this situation had become absurd. Finally, he made his decision. the kind of decision leaders make every day, the kind that often appears reasonable in the moment, the kind that becomes infamous afterward. Move the dog. Weber didn't respond. That's an order. The sergeant looked toward Rex. The German shepherd remained frozen in place, watching, waiting, almost pleading. For a brief second, Weber considered refusing. The thought flashed through his mind, not as rebellion, as protection. But military organizations are built upon obedience. Refusal carried consequences, severe ones. Slowly, he walked toward the dog. Rex resisted, then reluctantly allowed himself to be pulled aside. The intersection was clear. The convoy began moving. Captain Falk felt vindicated. Problem solved. Schedule restored. Mission resumed. The engines roared forward. The first vehicle crossed the intersection. Then the second. Then the third. For a moment, everything seemed normal. And then the earth exploded. The blast shattered the morning. A column of fire erupted beneath the lead vehicles. Steel twisted. Glass vaporized. The shockwaves slammed into nearby troops. Men were thrown into snowbanks. Windows shattered hundreds of meters away. The frozen ground itself seemed to leap upward. For several seconds, nobody understood what had happened. Then came the screams, the smoke, the chaos, the realization, a hidden explosive device, buried beneath the road, waiting, patiently, silently, until the convoy crossed directly above it. The first vehicle disappeared inside a cloud of debris. Another rolled onto its side. Fragments rained across the intersection. The world became noise. Commands, cries for medics, shouts for stretchers, the smell of burning fuel, the smell of blood. And standing beside Sergeant Weber, trembling but unharmed, was Rex. The dog stared toward the crater, as if he'd known all along. Investigations begin long before official reports. They begin in whispers, questions, looks exchanged between survivors. The same questions surfaced repeatedly. How had the dog known? Nobody could answer. Not completely. Perhaps traces of explosive chemicals, perhaps librations beneath the frozen surface, perhaps something science still struggles to explain. The mechanism mattered less than the result. The dog had identified danger before every human present, and he had been ignored. Words spread rapidly. Soldiers talked. Officers talked. Witnesses compared stories. One detail remained constant. Weber had warned them. Falk had overruled him. At first, the captain defended his decision. He had followed procedure. He had acted based on available information. He had fulfilled his responsibility. All technically true. But technical truths often struggle against moral realities, because every survivor remembered the same image. A dog refusing to move. A handler begging for caution. An officer choosing momentum instead. The facts remain stubborn. And facts have a way of eroding excuses. The official inquiry began several weeks later. Inside a stark military hearing room, witnesses described the events, one after another. Drivers, radio operators, junior officers, medics. Each testimony added another piece. Each account narrowed the distance between decision and consequence. Captain Falk sat silently through most of it, listening, absorbing, remembering. There are moments in life when people stop defending themselves because they already know the truth. This was one of those moments. The inquiry board wasn't examining whether he had intended harm. No one believed he had. The real question was more uncomfortable. Had pride influenced judgment? Had pressure overridden caution? Had authority dismissed expertise? Those questions cut deeper, because the answers were increasingly obvious. When Sergeant Weber finally testified, the room became unusually quiet. He wasn't interested in revenge. He wasn't interested in humiliating Falk. He simply explained what he had observed, what he had felt, what Rex had communicated through behavior. Then he described the hardest moment, pulling the dog away, watching the convoy move forward, knowing something felt wrong, unable to stop it. For the first time, several members of the board looked away, because everyone understood the weight of that memory. Some burdens never leave. Not because of what happened, because of what almost didn't happen. The final report avoided dramatic language. Official reports often do, but its conclusions were devastating. The warning signs had existed, expert concerns had been dismissed. Additional caution should have been exercised. Alternative procedures were available. Lives might have been saved. The wording was careful. The implications were not. Captain Falk's career never fully recovered. He remained in service for a time, but the path upward ended at that frozen intersection. Promotions disappeared. Trust faded. His name became associated with a lesson no ambitious officer wants to represent. Not incompetence. Something more human. Overconfidence. As for Sergeant Weber, he received recognition for his conduct. But the attention never interested him. Whenever journalists or officers asked about that day, he redirected the conversation. Toward Rex. Always toward Rex. The German Shepherd eventually became known throughout military circles. Not as a mascot, not as a symbol, as proof. Proof that expertise sometimes arrives in unexpected forms. Proof that warnings do not become less important simply because they are inconvenient. Proof that certainty and rank are not the same thing. Years later, soldiers still told the story. New recruits heard it during training. Instructors used it to illustrate a simple principle. Listen to the people closest to the problem. Especially when their conclusions challenge your assumptions. Especially when the cost of being wrong is measured in lives. Captain Falk carried his own version of the lesson. Near the end of his career, a younger officer reportedly asked him about leadership. The answer surprised everyone present. The officer expected discussion about strategy, discipline, command. Instead, Falk spoke about listening, about uncertainty, about the danger of believing that authority automatically creates wisdom. Then he mentioned a German shepherd, a frozen intersection, and a decision he wished he could take back. Some mistakes disappear with time, others become permanent companions. This one stayed with him forever. History remembers battles, maps, generals, victories, defeats. But sometimes the most important lesson from a war emerges from a single moment on a frozen road. A moment when an animal understood danger before anyone else. A moment when expertise collided with ego. A moment when the need to keep moving became more important than the need to ask one more question. The explosion lasted only seconds. Its lesson survived for decades. Because the real tragedy was not that danger existed. The real tragedy was that the warning arrived in time and was ignored. So here is the question. When experience, instinct, and expertise challenge the judgment of someone in power, should authority still have the final word, or should the courage to listen be considered the highest form of leadership?